Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Shayla Brown of Genesis Birthing and Living, and this is You Can Do It, Stop C-Section. So, starting out, I'll give you a little bit about me and about my journey to Genesis Birthing. So now I'm a seasoned mother and birth worker, but I didn't start out that way. My journey has been filled with all types of fears and the same types of challenges that many women face in childbirth. I now want to use my story to inform and inspire new mothers about their God given power to birth, but first, the genesis of it all. So, my journey to Genesis started with miscarriages and a few mistakes. Um, I had a miscarriage. My first pregnancy was a miscarriage at 4 weeks. It was neglected by medical personnel. It was a very traumatic experience, and that kind of it snowballed into what's called a phantom pregnancy, or pseudocyesis, the clinical term for it, and caused a lot of social and emotional damage. So I had to get to the point where I accepted myself and where I accepted that though I was not in control of the situation totally, I could still depend on God and I could still trust God, and that I could still have a viable pregnancy without creating that myself. So again, pseudocyesis is kind of where you have a false pregnancy because you create it in your mind. So I had to trust that God would create that, so I didn't have to manifest it myself. So I started to inform myself about why it happened, the health challenges I was facing, and I had to stabilize myself for motherhood. So there was a lot of emotional work that had to be done, but also a lot of physical work as far as my diet, my physical diet, my emotional diet, my spiritual diet, my mental diet. So my studying, what I started with studying is I began seeking information from every source, independent sources, expert advice, formal training. I trained as a doula with the International Center for Traditional Childbearing, or ICTC, formerly ICTC. Now ICTC no longer exists. Now it's the Shafia Monroe Consulting Doula Full Circle Training. So that's where I had my first training. Then I studied with Matrona Midwifery, an online midwifery program, and then Health Connect One, which is a community doula training program. In addition to that, I've served as a community doula with South Phoenix Healthy Start, where I primarily served African American women and Spanish speaking women. There were underserved populations, and I also attended a lot of hospital births and learned a lot that way. So my first birth, my first actual viable pregnancy that resulted in the birthing of a live child, my first child, was somewhat of a horror story. So the pregnancy was fine physically. I mean, most of my prenatals were good. My iron levels were good for the most part. No protein in my urine, anything like that. But I didn't have a lot of emotional support, and I was going through a lot with my family. So my labor that affected my labor, I had 5 days of labor in my mother-in-law's house. Right, it resulted in a vaginal birth. Um, I also was in a financial strain, so I was at my mother-in-law's house because I didn't have a house of my own at the time. When I got pregnant, I was living and working in Memphis. And we were in a pretty terrible housing situation, actually. I mean, like it was bad. Yeah. So we had to leave there. We also were not making enough money anyways to stay, and I did not have maternity leave, so I couldn't have stayed there anyways after having my baby. So we moved in with my husband's family, had our birth there, and it was 5 days of labor. Again, I had studied as a doula, but I never birthed before. I didn't have a doula. I didn't have any family support. I had my in-laws, but no blood relatives. So that was pretty rough. Um, Second labor. I had a lot more professional support. I had a great midwife. I was also training as a community doula with Health Connect One at the time. So I had a cohort of doulas around me. But I had moved over like 200 miles across the state from my family that I was already estranged from anyway. So it was pretty lonely. Although I had like all the support, and then the support didn't come until I was like 33 weeks pregnant. So it was a pretty lonely experience, even though professionally, as far as professional support, I feel like it was the probably the most ideal birth that I had, and I had to do a lot of depending on strangers, but it turned out very well. Again, another home birth, another vaginal birth. Everybody was very kind and hopped in, helped. But I had the worst postpartum depression ever because, again, I'm in total isolation. I already have one baby who is only about 15 months older than this new baby. So I'm pretty much juggling two babies. My husband is in medical school. My family is across the state, and we're not really in a good place anyway. Um, so again, limited family support. So it was not the most ideal situation, but the birth went well, the labor went well. Third baby. Third baby was what I like to call a hot but triumphant mess. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you why. So, third baby, right? Going through, oh man, I mean, so being isolated from our families, my husband and I just really went through a really, really rough time. It got so bad that we decided to get a divorce. We were in the middle of this divorce between states trying to navigate a pregnancy and a birth. So I had no income because I was a stay-at-home mom, no money. There was no one to watch my toddlers when I went into labor with my third baby because when I went into labor with my third baby, the midwife that I used for my second baby was not available. Um, she wasn't available. So I had to use a nurse midwife that I knew. So this means that I'm going from home birth situation into this hospital situation, which was uncomfortable. And I anticipated that I would have some fighting to do, but it's still rough to deal with in the middle of it. So I'm in the middle of divorce, no income, no money. It's not the home birth that I'm typically used to. I having this knowledge as a doula, having all of this training, and having my personal experiences, and knowing my body and knowing what's best for my birthing experience, and still being in a hospital and people telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about, or having to fight to do what I know is normal, like get out of the bed, move around, not necessarily be tied to the monitor. So that was a little bit of added stress, but I did have a doula. I did have a student doula there, so that was very helpful. I was getting government insurance at the time, Medicaid. Here it's access. So that was pretty much the option that I had. I didn't have any money for a home birth midwife, and I couldn't find the one, and the one that I wanted anyway was not available. So I'm in this hospital, and but I still managed to have, still was able to prove the power of Genesis birthing. Still managed to have a completely natural birth, no drugs. I did get out of the bed and walk around. I was able to eat. I was able to fight for the things that I knew I needed, even though I was in a tough situation and it wasn't the ideal situation. Fourth baby, okay? Fourth baby comes. My husband and I have reconciled. Obviously, we're having a fourth baby, right? But still, we're still over 200 miles across the country from either of our families. So there's no family support, nobody to really visit us or check on us until after the birth, really. So that postpartum was a lot better, but the birthing process was still, pretty much just as lonely. Also, I did get prenatal care with a nurse midwife, the same nurse midwife that delivered my first baby. However, I wanted to try unassisted. So during this process, I also found out that my baby was breech. So there was all this talk about a C-section, about an external version where they basically you go into the hospital, they drug you up, and then they try to turn your baby, and it only had about a 45% success rate. And if it didn't work, or when it didn't work, I would end up with an emergency section. So I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. So I went home, got on spinningbabies.com, was able to flip my baby. So baby's not breech anymore, and there's no more talk of a C-section. But I just didn't. It just reminded me of what I didn't want from a hospital setting. So I went into labor, and I had a talk with God, and was like, okay, you know what, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to decide to trust you fully, and I am going to birth unassisted because you have provided the assistance I need. Plus, my husband thought he could do it from day one anyways, so decided to give him a chance to prove himself, if you will. So it was completely unassisted. I labored for about a day and a half, and then had my baby on my floor on my hands and knees, and my husband caught him. Of all my births, of course, it cost the least. It was the most fulfilling because I absolutely was able to do whatever I wanted in the timing that I wanted. I didn't have to worry about where my children were going to be or who they were going to be with, and they were with me. So that was it was not stressful at all. And so that is my journey, and quick recap, my journey has been filled with temporary hardships that sometimes felt like permanent hardships, a lot of isolation, but it's all been made worth it by the beautiful family that I've been blessed with as a reward. Genesis birthing requires us to embrace temporary pain in order to gain lasting joy and peace. So your journey to Genesis birthing starts with your story. What will your story be? Think of your birthing story with the end in mind. How do you plan to retell your birthing story? What do you hope to feel each time you retell the story? What will your birthing story be? Will it be one that you even want to tell? Or will it be an experience that you simply just made it through? Will your birthing story be a story about a vaginal birth? Or will it be a story about a C-section? You can decide. And that's what I'm here to let you know. You can decide. And I'm here to give you the tools, the expertise, the confidence to decide. All right, see you in the next video.